Dad and George grew up in a booming city in what's now known as the Rust Belt. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the major car plant in town. You were pretty much guaranteed a job at the plant in town as soon as you got out of high school. George was one of those people. Dad wasn't. Dad accepted a scholarship to his dream school to study engineering. During the weekends and holidays, he'd come home and hang out with his buddies, including George. One afternoon, Dad gets a phone call from Grandma. George had been jumped after work and had the metaphorical tar beaten out of him. For a while, it looked like he wasn't going to make it. By some miracle, George pulled through but was in such bad shape that he had to retire early and go on disability. While on one of his visits home, George's dad, Walter, pulls Dad aside and asks him if he knows a guy named Flynn. Dad had heard the name was one of the local troublemakers. He asked Walter why, and Walter revealed that the wallet had been found by George's body and given to him. The paramedics thought the wallet was George's. No, I have no idea why they didn't check on it. Unfortunately, the city was going through financial difficulties, thanks to corruption and mismanagement, to the point that they didn't have enough money to pay their police officers during the weekends. No, I am not kidding. From 8 p.m. Friday night to 6 a.m. Monday morning, there wasn't a single police officer on duty. Since the assault took place on Friday night, there wasn't much anyone can do. Dad asked Walter what he was going to do about it. Walter looked at him with a stern face and said, "I take care of my own." Walter was an army vet who had served during World War II in Korea. He never spoke about his time, claiming he was a radio technician and never left the base. He never breathed a word to anyone, even George's mother, his wife. The full story never came out until after George's death, when a letter Walter had written before his death was found in George's possessions. After realizing that Flynn was one of the people who had destroyed George's life, Walter got in touch with his friends. He was a personable guy, the type, the kind who makes friends in 5 minutes. They all agreed that something had to be done, and thus Operation George's Revenge was born. Walter and his friends began observation of Flynn and would keep tabs on him. It took several weeks, but eventually, Flynn and his buddies, Mac and Zeno, were overheard bragging about the attack. Knowing who to attack, they moved to the next steps. Walter's friends, some of whom worked in high places, decided to make some phone calls to their friends in the plant where all three worked. See, these friends were union, state was closed shop at the time, and, disgusted about what happened to George, they decided to make things difficult for them. They'd remove vital tools for emergency maintenance at the last minute, put them in positions they weren't good in, and rearrange the schedule so they got the worst shifts, to name a few. They also began a whispering campaign so everyone at the plant knew what had happened. In this city back then, who you knew and what everyone thought you've done was enough to make or break you. The goal was to get them to quit. And after a year or so, all three had quit, frustrated with how they were being treated. But Walter and his friends aren't done. Not by a long shot. A few phone calls and anonymous letters later, Flynn, Mac and Zeno were unemployable in the district. Because they hadn't been fired, they weren't entitled to severance or anything. Soon their money ran out, but they couldn't get out of town because everyone knew from the whispering campaign what they had done to George. For the rest of their lives, Walter and his friends kept an eye on Flynn, Mac and Zeno. Just when it appeared that they had an out, the whisper/letter campaign would start again and they'd be denied an out. The three men ended up homeless and destitute alcoholics who couldn't even get state aid. And this is in a state that is known for its generous aid for those in bad straits. Walter and his friends made a contingency plan to continue this until the three men were dead using the next generation. So those men would never forget what they did to George. Nobody was able to find out anything about Flynn, Mac, and Zeno, but I wouldn't be surprised that they're still stuck and miserable. Another aspect of this revenge I've noted is that when people like Flynn and his buddies are exposed for the assholes they are, then employers know that they are not hireable because they reduce productivity, morale, and efficiency in the workplace. Workplace bullying is not a joke, and by enabling bullies like him, it makes fertile ground for lawsuits regarding toxic workplace environments. Walter did his workplace a favor by pushing Flynn, Mac, and Zeno out of work for the rest of their lives. Their homelessness is an added bonus, demonstrably false in plenty of cases. I saw in Ulf workplaces full-on rapists and pedos keep their jobs. They were the MGMT's favorites, even probably because they secretly had something in common.